So, Erica Ifill of Bad and Bitchy, thanks so much for joining me today. You are in the nation's capital, Ottawa. I'm here in Alberta's provincial capital, might be a nation's capital,
My hometown.
couple of years. Yeah, well, I'm in Edmonton, but your home
Yeah, it's
province.
my hometown.
Oh, you're from Edmonton.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought you were from Calgary, but that's just where your parents
That's
live.
where that's where I'm from.
Yeah, I don't want to dox your parents, but yeah, Calgary's a big city.
Yeah, I spent part of my year in Calgary. I'm the more I'm in Calgary lately, the more I like it.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean,
know why. I don't know why. I really don't.
um, yeah, the sorry, just some chatter behind me. There we go. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a cool counterculture in Calgary. That because the city, has this reputation, I think rightfully so, as being very corporate, very sterile. There is like a counterculture against that. That you don't see as much in Edmonton, just because I find like your average Edmontonian is way less of an asshole than your average Calgarian. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean?
All the good
But
people are in Edmonton.
yeah, I mean, but there are a lot of good people in Calgary. It's just you have to find them.
Well, I found a few through you.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're a great you're my guide to like the Albertan counterculture. Because it's true, it does exist and you could see glimpses of it. Um I think that all in all, like day-to-day life in Alberta is just different in the sense that the whole environment is different. Like the people are different and people will actually talk to you. It's wild. Um, yeah, in public, it's wild.
Yeah, there is a certain like friendliness. This sort of it's almost I feel like it's a prairie thing
It is a
where
prairie thing.
right
This
where's
this this guy, let me give you an example. So when I was coming back to Ottawa, I was talking to this woman who's from Ottawa and she was going to Vancouver. We were talking about the election and stuff. We had a pretty good long conversation. And when we disembarked, she like there was no bye, no nice to meet you, none of that. Nothing. She just left, right? And that's so very Ottawa. Like, whereas I remember sitting next on a different trip, I remember sitting next to a guy from Saskatchewan and we were like chit-chatting, right? For a lot of the flight. And when we disembarked, he said, well, it was very nice to meet you and to have a good conversation. You made my flight, da 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 da. Thank you. And I was like, oh, thank you, the same. And then we just walked off into our respective lives, right? And I that is a clear difference between people in Alberta or people on the prairies and people in Ontario. And that's why we think Ontario's stuck up
Mhm.
because they don't know how to be like real people. You know what I mean? That live in like a community. So they'll never talk to you unless they have to. And I'm not saying you have to like you owe your time to people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that the social environment's totally different.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think, in a lot of ways, like Alberta in particular is a lot more American than the other Canadian provinces because I mean it was settled by a lot of American like revolutionary people who brought like their sort of republicanism to Alberta, whereas Ontario it was loyalists, right? Um But
Absolutely.
in terms of that, in terms of people being friendlier, I think it's actually Ontario that's more American culturally in that regard, right? Uh,
Yeah.
in that people are like who are you? Like why are you talking to me? Type of thing.
Yeah. I agree. Uh,
Yeah.
so, how about that election?
Yes. I was about to ask. Right. So you've got Mark Carney and the Liberals have a very strong minority government, right? I believe it's what 169
9? Yeah.
nine seats now, so three short of a majority. Um, and I thought the Liberals were going to get a huge majority. I thought it was going to be bigger than 2015, just the way that Trump's threats had impacted the campaign in this sort of shiny brightness of Mark Carney as this exciting new outsider banker candidate who the conservatives asked to run for them, more than a decade ago. Um, but what I
Yeah,
underestimated,
they did, didn't they?
yeah, Harper wanted him to be finance minister after, I believe, after Jim Flaherty died, which would have been, yeah, a decade ago.
I mean, it
Uh,
wouldn't have been the worst thing, like, whatever.
yeah, I mean, because Jim Flaherty also was like comes from that red Tory
Yeah.
tradition that
Yeah.
Mark Carney comes from. So it's, I mean, you know,
I understand their marriage better now because that PC reform um track, or at this point it's a schism, uh, tracks with Harper wanting to bring those two pieces together.
yeah, I thought naively that a lot of the red Tories would sort of just go to the Liberals, who are the red Tories now, because reform essentially swallowed up the PCs.
Hmm.
But again, I mean, the Conservatives got their highest uh, vote since 1988, more than Harper ever got, right? So, and of course, Polyev lost his own
Wait, is
seat.
that in raw numbers?
It's in percentage. I would imagine that it would also be in raw numbers just because there are more people,
Right.
right?
That's
I'm
that's what people. Yeah, have you ever read an article about the numbers and they're like, "Oh, well, so and so got more votes than so and so 11 years ago." I'm like, 11 years ago there were just fewer people in Canada.
right, and you see this all the time
So
too.
where's the percentage? Like, give me something standardized to work with here, you know? And this is where I feel like journalists go wrong. So exactly what you said, you're like, "Oh, they got their greatest vote total or whatever." And you saying, "Well, there's just more people in Canada." Nobody ever says that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
just
that.
mathematically, it's like expected, you know?
Yeah, I mean that's why the
Especially in the growth,
percentage I think
if the
matters.
growth is bigger in those traditional conservative places, right? For example.
Yeah, like
So,
Alberta has seen a
yeah,
huge increase in its
exactly.
population in the past few years.
Yeah,
But I think that's why the percentage is the most important. I mean, the
yeah.
Conservatives getting 41%. I mean, Harper couldn't get more than 39, right? But I'm wondering what you think that'll mean in terms of how Mark Carney governs, because he's got close to a majority. His own politics are quite clearly, center right. Um, um, and yeah, I mean, what do you think this next parliament's going to look like in terms of what it actually does?
Well, he's a banker, so I understand. So I just guess he's going to bank.
And bank
You
is going to be
know, banker's going to bank. So, in other words, I see the Liberals moving into a center right position. Um, and he's shown that already with his cabinet. Um, which is why I don't believe in like this balance. I don't believe in balanced budget. I think it's bullshit. I think it's just a way to it's austerity by by full mathematics. That's what it is. It doesn't like the last what decades we've had balanced budgets. Look where we are.
Hmm. Yeah, like talking about in the 1990s, right?
Yeah, the
And
90s were pivotal and the early 2000s pivotal.
yeah, because it fundamentally changed, I think, the relationship of citizens towards the state. That it wasn't about the state actually providing for people. It was
Right.
about consumers purchasing a service, right? That and we haven't recovered from that. And speaking about, sort of how people play around with numbers and ignore how the population has grown. You see all the time these articles about how, and Carney, of course, has played into this, how the public sector grew to unprecedented levels under Trudeau, right? More money had been, like, the size of the public sector grew to the greatest levels since Trudeau. And it's like, well, I'd hope so, because the population also grew to its highest level ever. Um, and if you look at actual, like, percentage of GDP spent on public sector, I mean, it increased under Trudeau after decreasing severely, under Mulroney, Chrétien, Martin, Harper. Um, that it's still lower than it was under pure Elliott Trudeau, right? But you don't see people talk about that, and you're certainly not going to
Because
see.
they don't know how to do numbers. Like people don't know how to do statistics. I I think every journalist journalism student needs an intro to economics and an intro to statistics. Because the way they're thinking about statistics makes no fucking sense to me. Like it's nice to talk to you because you actually understand what statistics are. But this idea of using raw numbers to describe something, I have questions. It's like if you're, for example, comparing two things, then you can't necessarily use raw numbers. You have to use a standardized measurement. And so percentage, for example. Now, the fact that the conservatives got 41% of the vote to tell the liberals something, I don't think they're going to learn because they're the liberals. But for me, if I were to win, if I were up against Mark Carney, okay, because Mark Carney just arrived at the right time. That's it. Mark Carney got elected because of timing, because Trump got elected. And, you know, if Trump didn't start his 51 state thing, and his tariffs, I don't think Mark Carney would have won.
No, I don't either, and that's why I don't think Polyev, even though he lost his own seat, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people within the Conservative Party, except for, the same old, like, residual red Tories, who are going to call on him to step down because, again, it was circumstances worked against him. He was on track for a super majority before Trump decided to really ignite this Canadian patriotism that I think really plays well into the sort of liberal um, brand. Um, and he got, again, he got the greatest vote share since Brian Mulroney. And I think he's going to stick around. I'm wondering, how long do you think this government's going to last?
Well, the conservatives are having a leadership review, aren't they?
Yeah, they're having a leadership review. I would be surprised if Polyev didn't
Yeah, didn't
pass
like
with
sail through that.
yeah.
Yeah. He's on the precipice of something. And, if he had, this is the thing about Polyev. He can have all of the ingredients to still fuck it up. And the reason is because he can't help himself. He cannot help himself in terms of being like a bully or being like, he was super aggressive. Um, but he's channeling a lot of frustration. And I think that that's something that the Liberals have to be aware of and have to really work on. I'm afraid. If it were me and I were Poilievre's campaign manager, not like the one he has, um,
Not Jenny
uh,
Byrne.
no, I would be like, because Jenny Byrne feeds into that aggressive, like aggression and his whining about everything. Forget Trudeau and the carbon tax, okay? I know that plays well in Alberta, but it's not going to play well in Quebec,
Right.
okay? So I don't know which country you want to be a part of, okay? But he's never rectified those two things, reconciled those two things. How are you going to get votes in Quebec and votes in Alberta? And I think that's a big problem for them. As we saw this time, they lost fucking Quebec.
Hmm.
And you
And
cannot form government in this country without a substantial part of Quebec and a substantial part of Ontario. That's just the way the country works. Okay.
yeah,
Those are the
I mean,
battleground.
generally speaking, that's true. But Harper showed, right, like his 2011 majority. I mean, the NDP swept Quebec, right, and what they did to compensate for not having Quebec, because people in Quebec aren't going to stand for huge cuts to the public sector. That's just not in their
Right.
political culture. Is
Right.
is is they focused on wooing, immigrant communities in the suburbs around Toronto and Vancouver, right? Um,
It was a
and
brilliant plan. Let's be
yeah, it was that was
honest.
Jason Kenney's. That was his like
Jason
signature.
Kenney is a fucking good. I don't think we talked about this when you came on the podcast.
Mm,
How good of a politician Jason Kenney is, and how, um, as per your book, Kennyism.
thanks for the plug.
You're welcome. Um, no, I really enjoyed our conversation because you have these nice details about pieces of Alberta that you don't see out here. And which is why it's a shame that I have to see Corey Tenike or whatever he is on fucking Power and Politics, and like not somebody like you that knows like the background and the legislative stuff and all of that. Like I feel that's where mainstream media goes wrong. It has all of these partisans and these people who are in the bubble, and they all sound like they're talking to themselves. I'm like, you can't be talking to me, and I'm
Right.
into this stuff. You're just talking amongst yourselves.
Yeah,
Why
and
not
that's what.
get people who know shit instead of people who just want to say shit? You know?
Yeah,
Anyway, that's
and
my thing.
yeah, I appreciate that. But I mean, on election night, the CBC had Jason Kenney as a recurring panelist, right? And he's a smart guy, no doubt,
Very
but ferociously partisan, famously, and um, and that's why I liked watching streams like the Breaches, and I mean, I was on Rob Rousseau's stream, and Canada's National Observer had one with Ricochet, because these are at least, may not agree with everything everyone on there says, and you shouldn't, because there should be a wide variety of views, but these aren't like partisan operatives, for the most part, who are speaking on these panels. These are like activists and journalists and intellectuals and people who can give.
that's it. There are no intellectual politicians on political TV anymore, except for Chantal Hébert. If once Chantal Hébert goes, we're all fucked. Okay? Because she is the one who weaves that history and that legislation nicely, um, very well. You can understand it. Like, I don't want to hear fucking Andrew Coyne
Oh my
like
god.
be an old man and like talking to the clouds and deficits, deficits. You should be running a deficit in bad times. That's
Yeah.
why you don't run one in good times.
Right.
And then people are like, are there any good times left? There'll always be good times. Just like there'll always be shitty times. But seeing is that the public sector grew due to COVID. I love how people forget COVID happened and that different choices had to be made. Who is going to deliver your COVID relief? Could you call Pierre up and be like, can you deliver my COVID relief?
Well, in some cases, Shoppers Drug Mart,
Oh, Lord, that's another problem with this country. For a country that loves the free market, it does also operate on oligarchy.
yeah, corporate welfare. I mean, the amount of government handouts Shoppers Drug Mart gets. Not to mention like the oil and gas companies who got like everything they wanted during the pandemic, right? When like oil prices were like negative at one point.
Well,
Uh,
the liberals love themselves industry, some industry. They will give all the tax breaks to industry and then tell you they're doing you a favor. We're just like, no, that's not how it works.
yeah,
Um, Industry is basically, industry, the success of industry depends on how much government help you get and in which ways. You know,
yeah, and that's the when people,
Tesla's a great example.
yeah, and especially SpaceX. I mean,
Yeah.
it totally is a product of government subsidies, which it seems like
So why
is
not
going to
why
be
not put
the
that towards NASA?
right, exactly, and actually having like a federal,
Because you're spending the money either way. Okay, this is what I don't get. Tax cuts are essentially government spending.
yeah.
Okay. So that's why the Andrew Coins of the world, I'm just like, okay, but the tax cuts you want are an expense, or sorry, an expenditure. Um, and so the money that you're giving to tax cuts, you could easily give to government in like industries. Space did not be already um colonized by the rich. Like already. But if you gave the money to NASA, it would be more space exploration. We could find out about shit. I wouldn't have to see Katy Perry doing bullshit on my TV screen.
Oh my
And
god.
what's her name? Gail. One of these days, we're gonna have to have a talk about Oprah's friends because Oprah. I have questions about her friends. I really do. That
Yeah,
she
I mean,
hoists upon us. Gail was
well,
horrible. Well, have you gone to space? No, Gail. That's the whole point. Okay. Have you gone to the fair? Fuck you. Anyway, sorry. We're off topic. Go on.
no, but speaking about Musk, and sort of the way government decides to spend its money, um, it seems like Carney got pretty free ride in terms of advocating for pretty significant cuts to the public sector. Um, and I read there was a good CBC piece. They do those sometimes. Talking to labor, public sector, federal public sector labor unions about what the sort of conservative and the liberal budgets would mean for them. And one labor leader, I don't have his name right in front of me, and or the name of his union. It wasn't PSAC; it was a smaller
Mm.
union. But he was like, essentially, we've got the conservatives are running on doing Doge, and the liberals are running on doing Doge light, right? And those are the only two serious options. I mean, again, 85% of voters voted liberal and conservative. Um, 90 more than 90% of the seats are liberal and conservative. And as many criticisms I have of the NDP and of Jagmeet Singh's leadership of the NDP, I do think the Canadian like political discourse is poorer for not having
Absolutely.
uh, uh, you know substantial NDP presence in Parliament.
Mhm.
Because there does need to be a voice, and I mean the bloc will serve at this
I
as
was
this
just about to say the
against
block.
all the
I think the block is a nice guardrail for the liberals in terms of public sector stuff because they're not going to support that shit.
right.
I
Yeah,
mean, the conservatives will, but they might not because it's just the liberals, right? So
right. But
I just, yeah, I don't know. I, w- because we don't have any left wing representation, we have to rely on the bloc. Can you imagine?
yeah, and the bloc isn't there to
Basically,
save us. You know, I mean, they don't exist
no,
to save us. They exist to
no,
protect Quebec's interests, as the sort of nationalist uh, framework views them. But um, yeah, I mean, and I mean, there is that strong social democratic element within Quebec nationalism, but there's also this very, much uglier xenophobic element.
absolutely.
There, I think the contradictions of the bloc are really exemplified by this ad they ran. I think in 2011 or 2015, maybe, where it was this drop of oil and then it like transforms into a woman in a niqab, right? So it's like they're pro environment, but also they don't want too many Muslims in
Yeah,
Quebec. So
yeah.
um which I mean does give the
Well,
NDP.
apparently neither does anybody else. So I just like,
Yeah, and that's another thing I think that some a development that really didn't take up a lot of oxygen in the campaign because people were talking about tariffs and Trump and the size of the public sector and all of these and housing to a lesser extent is
mm,
this and this is tied into discussions about housing is this backlash against immigration that you're seeing, right? um where they're being scapegoated for housing crisis that is being viewed within this very rigid neoliberal framework where it's like, yeah, the
but
reason
we're not
housing
even
is
talking about it in the full neoliberal framework because what about like investors, like asset investors? I'd like to know how much of the house prices are fueled by them. I mean, people call it speculation, but it's not really speculation. We're talking about big companies like, oh, Brookfield, that that suck up a lot of real estate as part of their portfolio.
yeah, exactly, and like
So where are the gains going? Shareholders.
yeah, and they don't care if people don't live in these
So
houses. They're
where's the CBC thing about that? Never mind. I probably have to write it myself.
I mean, the CBC is a big organization that does a lot of things. I'm sure there have been stories on that, but there's also been probably not as many as they've done these, landlord sob stories that I wrote about a couple years ago about these, hard done by mom and pop landlords who are having such trouble evicting, problem tenants and
Yeah.
um which there are cases in which there are, shitty tenants that aren't paying their rent. And if you're a landlord who, isn't, doesn't own a REIT, like that does take a hit on your finances. But first of all, you could just not be a landlord. Second of all, like, yeah, that those types of things are newsworthy. I don't want to deny that, right? Like,
You know what's newsworthy
but
about landlords that like I don't hear in the news is, and this goes back to um, landlords are making a sweet killing not paying for their mortgage, but gaining all the equity. Why don't we talk about that? That
Yeah.
basically that basically renters are subsidizing your equity growth, your asset growth.
Yeah, and far less likely to hear about that than you are about, some problem tenants and how you know, the,
And the tax breaks, by the way, from that asset, from owning that capital asset.
yeah, and I mean, there, landlords and developers are about to get more tax breaks from Carney, because again, we're stuck in this neoliberal framework where it's like, okay,
Haven't
there
we
are
been doing this for like 10 years? Basically, all I heard was the national housing strategy. That's all I heard.
yeah, yeah, it which
Let's incentivize developers. All I heard was public money going to developers. Well, let's because tax breaks for developers is spending on developers,
right.
right? And so here's my thing. What a shitty that how that debate was trash. Okay, first of all, like why are we there's more interest in timekeeping than the actual issues. Okay? We like debates are quote unquote good if the time's been kept and people aren't interrupting each other. I mean, okay. Like here's the thing about the debate is that nobody nobody who hosts these debate actually know policy. So they don't like call out people on their policies. Like, for example, I would have been like, what's the difference between that and the national housing strategy we have right now? Because that's what the national housing strategy is. It's to incentivize developers.
Yeah,
Oh, and we need to get this zoning thing permitted and this zoning thing. How much help do you think that is? Oh, we're going to take the GST off first-time home buyers. That's the dumbest shit. Talk about talk about the bottom of the barrel policy. Okay? That's what you've been doing.
yeah, it's just more of the
Like
same. And
that's what CHRC or yeah, Canada
CMHC,
House C what?
Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, I believe.
CMHC. Oh, good
Yeah,
Lord. Okay. That's what CMHC has been doing forever. They've literally been incentivizing developers. I know I've gone through the fucking national housing strategy. And literally, part of the problem is number one, and Mark Carney did mention this, is off-market housing. And number two, that market housing is based on I think the one that Christopher Freeland in Vancouver was like, yay. I actually crunched the numbers for that. And I was like, this isn't market housing. This is fucking expensive housing. And you're basing single people's house like rental rate on a family's income.
right. And there's never a definition of affordable housing, right? Like
No.
affordable for whom? And I mean the definition of affordable housing is, I believe, no more than 20% or maybe 30%, I think, of
Yeah.
a person's income who's in the lowest income quintile, right? So the lowest 20%. And that's just not on the table, right? When they talk about affordable housing, they're talking about below market housing. But, you know, if you're paying $1,000 less um, than the market price, I mean, that doesn't do you much good. And I do think the NDP, for again all the disappointments and failures of this campaign, I think they were pointing in the right direction when they're like, we are going to use federal housing funds to force provinces to adopt some form of rent control. I thought that that was a very good policy, and it should, because the liberals and conservatives are like,
Yet we never heard about it unless we like squint, unless we did this.
yeah, I mean, and then they were running on victory bonds, so Canadian individuals can give the government money to build infrastructure to fight tariffs. I mean, it was, you know,
Isn't that what bonds are for, though, in
I mean,
general?
I'm yeah, yeah, but they were harkening back to this, World War II nostalgia. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. War bonds. Is it the
yeah,
war bonds?
yeah, well,
The
victory
GI
bond.
Bill in the States. And I
Yeah,
think we had war bonds, I want to say. Anyway, the idea is the same, right? And I just want people to know that nothing happens without government subsidies.
yeah, the free
Okay?
market doesn't exist.
Because the developers aren't going to be means tested, are they?
Right.
We have very little criteria for them. And like I just I don't understand this idea of this idea of neoliberalism is literally just austerity for the many and subsidies for the few.
Yeah, exactly.
Every industry is subsidized.
Yeah, like that is capitalism. That's how capitalism was created. Because as you know, giving people tax breaks, that's subsidy. That's an expenditure. You're choosing to give money to usually the people who need it least, right? Like oil and gas companies. Here in Alberta, they're talking about some way of giving them a tax break so they can clean up their, abandoned wells and pipelines, which they're legally obligated to do anyways. And at the same time, these companies are making a killing, right? They're in some cases making record profits. But it's just like, nope, we need to give them money. If you're on disability, sorry, we're gonna have to cut that. You can apply for one of the federal programs, but yeah, if you're in oil and gas, and that's true. Obviously, the Alberta grievance politics is based on the liberals not being pro oil and gas enough. I mean, that's total nonsense, total fucking nonsense. I mean, the liberals have been so pro oil and gas, and Carney's going to be even more pro oil and gas than Trudeau was. Um, they've just also,
Here's the problem with Carney though, is that Carney is in the most vulnerable position to make that switch because he was known as Mr. Climate Change Man.
he was the
He
climate.
was he was the UN Special Rapporteur on Climate,
I think it
or
was
part of
envoy.
that group.
He was an envoy. I don't think it was a rapporteur, but same
Oh,
difference.
okay, envoy. Okay, yes. He was part of the envoy. You know, I mean, granted, he wanted to clean up the planet with private equity, which I thought was a joke. But I'm like, am I listening to this is a joke, right? Anyway, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, I think that is a betrayal of himself and of um his brand, so to speak. You know, I think that the fight for climate is a lot of progressive stuff is ebbing, not flowing. Um, and people actually like progressive policies. So I don't understand what the NDPs do. I do understand, but the NDP is not going to get the same votes as as the liberals and the conservatives, except Labor.
Yeah, I mean, the NDP did lose a lot of votes to conservatives. They lost a lot more to the liberals because when the liberals were imploding, The NDP was pretty stagnant in the polls because I think they gained some liberal voters, but they also were losing a lot to the conservatives because Polyev was, again, talking about very real material concerns. Of course,
Ah,
his solutions are just going to make everything worse, but at least he was talking about them, right? I mean, I remember I went to a rally he did in 2022 in Calgary, his hometown.
yeah, yeah.
And um, he told this story about how, and whether it's true or not is besides the point. It's totally believable that there's this couple he met that live near in his riding or just outside his riding, who live in a trailer park, and they work in the quarry where they extract material to build homes. And they were saying that they told him that they don't think they're ever going to be able to afford to move out of the trailer park. And Polyev said, and I remember this quote almost verbatim because it was a very good quote, was when the people who build our homes can't afford to live in them, the economic system is completely unjust. And I was just like, how, like Jagmeet Singh should be shouting that from the rooftops.
This is what I don't understand. I think that like populism is just the way it is, okay, right now, politically. If the NDP had some left-wing solutions that dealt with the same thing, if I were the NDP, I would have a whole affordability thing. Same with conservatives, and this is where Pierre Poilievre messed up and couldn't help himself, right? The man is undisciplined, first of all. He couldn't help himself from being an asshole. That's the whole thing. He can't help himself from being an asshole because he's an asshole. Now, if he grew up a little bit and saw the longer picture, like just a medium term, I'd be like, you can ride this affordability thing all the way to Rideau Hall. Yeah, that's the Governor General. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
official
24 Sussex, I think,
24 Sussex. There you go.
which is, I believe, not where the prime minister's living.
No, they
Is
yeah,
being renovated.
something about asbestos.
Yeah, point taken.
So that's the thing. Like I think that affordability and and it's generational. Plus this masculinity thing, and men not being able to provide is like all wrapped up in, yes, misogyny. And there's a class system going on there. It's subtle, or maybe not that subtle. So you have generational class things because the people who own the assets, as we were talking about before, we have landlords who are basically picking up equity and not paying for it. And, woe be the landlords, you know? So I think that we need to like actually the time for progressive policies is here and it's been here for a bit. So I think obviously the NDP are not meeting the moment, but I don't see why why they didn't plaster all over the place what they did during that confidence and supply agreement. They should have leaned the fuck into that. Look,
Yeah, I mean,
we
it's
gave you
always,
childcare and pharmacare and dental care, you know.
yeah, I mean,
That's what it should have been.
it's always tricky when you're the junior partner in either a coalition, or this wasn't a coalition, but a supply and confidence agreement, because basically the bigger party can just take credit for doing all that, right? Like it was Carney who was saying, yeah, we're going to expand dental coverage, right? and just because he was in a position to say, yeah, we can do that. Um, and the NDP can take credit for it, and I think they deserve credit for it because I don't think the Liberals were going to do those things on their own. The question for me is whether they needed a formal agreement to pressure Liberals to do that, or if they could have done it on an ad hoc basis in a minority parliament, because that I think would have gained them a lot more credit. And I think it would have been a lot more clear to the public that this was the NDP pushing for this and not just the Liberals doing something in an agreement.
The NDP don't know what they don't do is they don't campaign year round.
Mm-hmm.
So
Never
by
do
the
politics.
time that dropped, okay, they should have been all over the place with their ads or something. See what we got you? Pharmacare, see what we got you? This is what it means. This is what it means for you. This is what it means for the people in the trailer park, you
Yeah.
know?
And I think Don Davies did that somewhat because he was sort of the point man on the pharmacare and the dental care stuff because he was the health
Mm.
critic. And I mean, he won, right? So, um, and now is the interim leader, though. For some reason, they didn't tell Leah Gazan about that.
Who did they tell?
Sorry.
That's what I want to. I want to know who they told and why.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like I think. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. Obviously, the NDP, the consultant class, and the establishment, these losers, these people who love losing, who saw that Jack Layton came the closest the party's ever been to obtaining power, but didn't obtain power. And they want more of that. And so anyone who's saying, no, 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 we actually need to push for bold progressive policy is just like, get out of here. Right. But again, I don't know if that was something that maybe got leaked to media before anyone in caucus found out, or if they explicitly excluded Leah. From that, it would be interesting to know whether, they told Don Davies or Heather, well, obviously they told Don Davies because he was the choice. But if they told Heather McPherson or Jenny Kwan or, Alexandra Boulerice, though Boulerice is also more on the left wing of the party, like Gazan is. So I don't know, but I mean, all these people, the Anne McGrath types,
Oh my gosh.
I mean, they need to go. They're in large part responsible for decimating the party in the long term. Of course, they did have some success short term with Jack Layton, which I think has a lot to do with, his personality and his likability and his charisma that sort of maybe papered over the fact that the party was certainly drifting towards the center under his leadership. I mean, they took socialism out of their constitution under Layton. That wasn't Mulcair, that was Layton. Um, and, I mean, if you go back before Layton, their next best perform. Well, I mean, I guess you could say Mulcair was the next best, though he lost half their seats. So I don't think that really counts. But it was Broadbent who, I mean, if you go back to the leadership election in the early 80s or late 70s after, I guess it would have been after David Lewis, um, he ran against Rosemary Brown, who was the left
Yeah.
candidate. And he was the more, by that time, he would have been the more centrist, neoliberal. Of course, people weren't calling it that then, candidate. But even then, by today's standards, Broadbent was like a staunch social democrat, right? I mean, he was to the left of Singh, who, of course, was to the left of Mulcair. Um, but, and, yeah, I'm really interested to see where the NDP is going to go. Because again, very, the Liberals have a very large minority. All they need is a few votes to keep the government going, and the NDP have a few votes to give
The
them.
Bloc has more.
The Bloc is more, and I think Carney is, I think, in the name of national unity,
He's
He
going to
will.
make nice with Quebec.
Sorry.
He's going to make nice with Quebec.
I think he will, but he's also going to try and make nice with the conservatives. I think because
Yeah, yeah.
there's also a strategic, a misguided, in my view, strategic component to that, which is like, and you see the Democrats in the states try and do this too, is to work, try and work, cross the partisan divide and work with the right who have no interest in doing so. And then when they demonstrate they have no interest in doing so, saying, see, they don't even want their priorities implemented, which we're offering to do. And that just shifts the entire conversation rightwards. Um, and Yeah, I mean it's pretty bleak, but I don't. Who do you think are gonna like? Who do you think are gonna be his like main cabinet ministers?
Did I tell you about my whole thing about not predicting? Because I'm really, really bad at it.
So am I.
Really bad.
So I mean, I predicted the Liberals would get like 195 seats, right? So, but
The
um,
Liberals are going to have to take care of that affordability option past their stupid housing policy, which is already their housing policy. You know, um, they are going to have to do something about the generations who have been left out of. It's not only what Pierre had was right in the sense that this was a place where you could work a job and provide for yourself in a decent standard of living. That's gone. Now, if the conservatives keep pounding on that, we hear you, we hear. Because I don't know what's wrong with the liberals. Like they don't hear. They're like the Democrats. They want to tell you what to think. Okay? They don't hear anything. And that's, I think, what's going to bring them down. So I agree with you. The conservatives they only lost by, they didn't lose by that much. I mean, how
nope.
many seats do they have? 140 something?
Yeah,
46?
yeah. I mean, they're behind the Liberals by 25 seats, maybe.
You can flip half of those, like in the years to come. I think what the conservatives need to do is their leader's too polarizing.
You think Polyev's got to go? Because I think
No, I think if Poilievre is smart, which I don't necessarily think he has, I don't think he has the political intuition sometimes. He doesn't realize that you catch more flies with honey. Um, yeah, and there's a time to be that bulldog, and then there's a time for being a little bit courteous, right? And it's like somebody was asking me about Carney in America, and I'm like, yeah, he buttered Trump's biscuits where without looking like, you know, a brown noser. And he also said, yeah, Canada's not for sale. In other words, yeah, this is the final word on this kind of thing. And yeah, Canada, he praised Carney, and people were like, what? Well, he was praised by a fascist. Yeah, but that fascist is also United States of America. And if you're not involved in their politics, they certainly will be involved in yours. So, my whole point is that Canada is now becoming the benchmark in terms of everybody's watching us in terms of how to deal with Trump. And I don't put trust in Poilievre that he's able to sit at the grown-ups table and walk that line. It's like he can't help himself. He has to go he has to go into this mode, this aggressive attack dog mode, where you hear the same thing from him every day, but you just don't care anymore. You know, the dude is pure red flags. He's an immediate block, you know? But I think the conservatives, if they keep that, are going in the right direction. And I think that's why they won well in Oakville and all of those 905 places.
Yeah, and I think that the Liberals dumping Trudeau and putting Carney in charge, in combination with fortune and
A lot of fortune.
yeah, they delayed the inevitable, but I can see Carney getting quite unpopular quite quickly once the impacts of the tariffs um are felt by people, and I think we'll be back to where we were in November, December. Maybe not that severe, because again, Carney is sort of this fresh face.
How long
And
do you think it would take people to like to sour on him? Because I was sour before the election. So
oh, I mean, I don't trust him. I never did. I was surprised once he actually started his campaign, and you got to see him and hear him about how human he came across. Seeing him on Daily Show or Nardwar, like he is kind of like a hip banker guy who like listens to music, and can talk to a person. He's had a conversation with a person before, which is more than you can say of a lot of politicians, it seems. Um, but I would say within the year, I think Carney's honeymoon will come crashing down. I don't think the government will fall that soon. I think it will probably last more than 2 years. But again, I don't know. I'm so bad at predictions, so don't don't go to the bank with that. But
yeah,
um,
I'm bad at predictions too. The people who can predict, God bless you. I personally, now I could look back and see what happened, and then I was like, oh, that happened. Yeah, makes a difference. But
because again, I mean, Carney is at the end of the day the embodiment of this global elite that Polyev has been railing against to great success.
and
Over
that's why he's not
the
going to
years.
last. That's why we're going to be. He could be one and done. You know, that's why we're like, because I'm sorry, I read that snore of a platform, and it was a snore because what? When did the liberals, like, the debate was like I was at the Republican National Convention. I'm like, why are we talking about border security and shit like that? And so much of Canada's identity is wrapped up in not being America that we end up being America, if you know what I mean. Because literally, I thought I was listening to Republicans before they went all, but like border security, national security, more
Re-
drones, more board, even the
Reducing
NDP.
immigration.
They what?
Oh, reducing immigration.
Yeah, it's all Republican. Nobody has yet proved to me that the immigrants are the reason why the the the
The
housing is so bad. That's just bullshit. I didn't know immigrants were trying to buy 3-bedroom, like 24 square foot houses in. I didn't know that's the market they were crashing, which is the only market anybody cares about. Oh, well, rents are going up because of immigrants. Maybe because house prices are going up. I don't know. Maybe it's me.
It's just the classic scapegoat, right? It's like, oh yeah, it's the immigrants. They're
When it's really class. Like This
Yeah,
is the thing. Don't aren't immigrants scapegoated for class issues? I just thought of that.
yeah, I mean, for sure. And I mean, you look at the temporary foreign worker program, and I mean, there are valid critiques from the labor perspective that you're bringing in this exploited foreign labor to undercut, um, you know, the domestic workforce. That's true, but the solution isn't to send them all back to where they came from. It's to integrate them into the economy and give them a pathway to citizenship.
Well, if you didn't take away all their rights, they wouldn't be as exploited, would they?
Hmm.
So I don't know why we're not fighting for like greater rights for every. Well, I do know, obviously, because of scapegoating, but it's a classic bourgeois um triangulation, right? It's well, it's really us, but if we make it them, then it becomes about them, and they don't think about us, right? Um, what is so? I'm reading a Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm
Oh,
like, okay, and I'm like rewatching Game of Thrones at the same time. I have this whole system of like read podcasts, watch different podcasts. Okay, it's like a whole thing with me. When I get off of this is what I'll be doing. I will be watching The Red Wedding. I'm so excited because I read about it and I'm like, yay. Okay, I'm on Tyrion's trial. No. Okay, anyway, I'm getting too deep into this. But Olenna Tyrell, if you know, you know, um, said to Tyrion, Tyrion's like, we can't afford this wedding between Joffrey and Marjorie. And she's like, well, isn't it funny that we give this and this and this and this? And he's like, yes, I'm happy for your contribution, blah, 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 blah. But, the people need comfort to know that their dollars are being spent, whatever. And she said, what the people need are distraction so that they can they can use their time with that, right? And otherwise, they're going to focus their attention on us, and that's going to be bloody. That's politics.
yeah. I mean, it's the oldest trick in the book, right? It's like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. That that's not. We're not your problem. It's these people who are being exploited even worse than you. They're your problem, right?
Yeah, the people with no rights are somehow taking away your rights. How does that work? I wish people would sit down and honestly think about these things because I'm like, how is it? So basically, the people who have the least amount of power are fucking up your life and you have more power than they do. How is that possible? You know? And I have this whole thing about like which industry did not rely on exploitation. And I'm hitting an impasse here. I can't really think of one. Not major industry anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll
I
let
mean,
you
I
think
don't know.
about that.
Maybe the
Maybe your
trades.
audience can think about that and then like reply to you in
Yeah, if any of
comments.
you can think of an industry that isn't exploitative, sound off in the chat. Um,
People, engagement counts a lot. If you want to keep seeing Jeremy and me, make sure you engage.
yeah, otherwise we might get bored. Um, what one thing I wanted to talk to you about is this backlash against wokeism or le wokeism as they call it in Quebec. Obviously, Polyev, this was he originally excluded it from his English platform and then updated it with the anti woke stuff and says
Be
it's
updated.
um pretty like the week before the election, if memory serves. or 2 weeks before the election. It was it was like a few days after the platform was released. Well, so I guess it would have been the week before the election. Um, I do think it was an oversight because I don't see. I mean, this is a huge part of his messaging consistently since 2022 was this war on woke, which is never defined. But I think we know the
You
sorts of
know,
things.
woke, you know what anti-woke looks like? America.
Yeah, and it's
I mean,
actually
you got your all these people were like, we want small government. Voila. That's what it looks like. We want government to work as a business. Voila. That's what it looks like. Like business is going to replace you if it's more efficient for them. That's not how public service heads the public. That's not how public services are supposed to be, you know.
yeah, and it's interesting because Polyev was saying, you really was the entire campaign. I was surprised by how well he did because he was really struggling to um, distinguish himself from Trump and position himself as being the guy who's going to stand up
How could
to
he? He's been giving us Trump for like 2 or 3 years. What did he think we were all going to forget?
and
You bet
and
on the wrong horse. You peaked too early. And you thought that meant that everything was working, which it was at the time, and decided that this is what you were going into an election with. Poilievre would have given the not non-confidence vote anyway, and they probably would have won it. So we would have been in an election anyway. There was always going to be a spring election,
yeah,
you
it's
know?
a matter of whether Trudeau was part of it or not.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, all this anti woke stuff, talking about deporting, non-permanent residents who support Palestine.
These
All
people
these,
are so dumb. Are they
all,
are they not paying attention? Like that's what the US said. And look, they're what's his name? Aberdazo? The guy in El Salvador. Do you
oh,
think I want to be in some El Salvador prison because I said the wrong thing about somebody? Because that's where we're heading. It never ends at the people they say they're targeting. Never. It never has. It never will. So next it will be permanent residents. Or no, no, no. So they're thinking about deporting non-permanent residents, right? Like people who are here
yeah,
without
Polyev was
permanent
talking
res.
about like people on like student visas. I think he had in mind who are involved in like Palestine protests on campus, right? Like Trump's doing in the states, but now Trump's like, maybe we can also deport citizens, right? And
Of course, they were always going to deport citizens.
yeah,
Like, like this to me was very like there was a straight line, and it's like doing what it's supposed to do. First of all, like students, yes, okay, because students are always the first targeted. Number two, next thing you know, okay, nobody who's on permanent residence actually know. It's students now. It will be Ukrainians when they start deporting Ukrainians. I want to see what everybody's going to say then.
see, I think in the States they'll do that because
Oh
already
yeah,
the state is shifting against Ukraine in the war and saying, no, you got to cut a deal on Russia's terms. And I mean, that's a whole other conversation. But in Canada, I don't think they can do that because the Ukraine lobby here is very powerful.
yeah.
And
So
uh,
they might actually save it.
yeah, and especially in Toronto, in Winnipeg, in Edmonton, especially in Edmonton, um, that's not going to fly. Um, but but yeah, I mean, and that is if you look at like the foreign policy views of like someone like Pierre Poilievre, Conservative Party of Canada, that's one. They're a lot less erratic than Trump is on foreign policy. A lot
Yeah.
more really just old school, like George W. Bush neoconservatism, forces of light and darkness, right? And so that's a distinction, but I mean that's not better than what Trump's doing. It's just a different flavor of awful.
It's basically the same thing.
Yeah,
You
because there isn't
basically
really a strong isolationist tradition in Canada like there is on
no,
can right, for
right.
better or for worse. But um, yeah, it's this backlash though. I wanted to talk about, and then maybe we can wrap up against against wokeism because you saw in the 2021 election, right, coming the year after George Floyd, and massive BLM protests across the country, in big cities and small. You know, leaders are paying lip service. Justin Trudeau took a knee famously at that at a BLM protest in Ottawa, and there was a lot of lip service paid to sort of notions of race and racial justice. And of course, this goes back further under Trudeau, talking about reconciliation with Indigenous peoples.
Do
And
you think that Trudeau will be judged better in hindsight?
Yeah, yeah, I think so. And
Because I
again,
think he did really change the the idea of what's important in politics. So, for example, you know, I think he probably did the best thing for in terms of um making politics and the marginalized more accessible, which is sad in this day and age. Um, but white men got upset because we got uppity. And it like if you go back to like 2015 really with Brexit, you started to begin to see a backlash um with class, for example. And then 2017 happened, Me Too happened, and then these white men were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't even touch her bottom anymore. What a disservice," you know? And that had quote unquote gone too far. Indigenous people with reconciliation, that's something else that went too far. And then of course racial justice went too far and they're done. They're over it. They're like, yeah, we're not gonna do this anymore. And
yeah,
so, unfortunately, that's what too woke or anti woke is. It's a backlash or the white lash from any sort of progress. Um,
and I mean, there were ways, in which, sort of quote unquote wokeness, DI initiatives, were used to as sort of like a smokescreen, I think, by
Absolutely.
corporate elites, right? Like every company put out a statement saying that Black Lives Matter in 2020, and I'm not sure what any of them actually did to make Black people's lives better in Canada. And this sort of white fragility, which was written by a white lady, became sort of all the rage in like corporate DEI structures, that really takes these broad systemic issues and individualizes them to personal issue of like repentance. um but again, I think my point is there was very little actual material progress made on these issues that you just outlined. But the backlash to them is going to take us even further back, right, than we were before. Um,
What did I
and
say? It's reconstruction? I think I wrote that somewhere. We're in the reconstruction. No, we're in the backlash to reconstruction. So,
We didn't even have a civil war.
we, I know, but you know, when, and it's funny how that's, they use violence. All this to say that, yeah, we're fucked for the next few years. When I say fucked for the next few years, I don't know what the economy is going to do. And if the economy goes south, we're really fucked. And if the economy goes south and people feel it, and the thing is, the capacity for absorbing an economic slowdown right now is very, very small. It's very small. So anyhow, the economy gets to the point where people are feeling additional pressure. For example, job losses happen and layoffs and so on, and you know, etc. The liberals aren't going to last very long. It's going to be reactionary. So again, if they don't deal with that affordability piece, and I'm not talking about their stupid fucking housing policy. I'm talking about, they don't even talk about groceries or giving more money to food banks. Not to say that that will, of course, that grocery piece is structural. So I'm not actually a big opponent, like a big proponent for that in the long term, but in the short term, there are things you can do, you know, like in the short term, there are definitely, you know, like government options.
Yeah, and you see Carney doing this sort of maneuver in which, because Trudeau in 2015, I think one way you mentioned earlier how he really did in some ways shift the national discussion in a more progressive way. I think that's clear with deficits and debt, and Tom Mulcair desperate to prove that the NDP isn't a left-wing party anymore, is like, you're going to balance budgets every year. And Trudeau was like, we're not going to do that. We're going to spend money on people. And, that was a huge factor in Trudeau winning. Um, and you see Carney sort of half-heartedly harken back to that by being like, look, we've got operating spending, so on services that people actually rely on. And we've got capital spending, big infrastructure projects that people rely on, but so does capital, hence, in business. And we're going to balance operating spending within 4 years. So again, services vulnerable people depend upon, and but we'll go into debt to finance capital spending. So he has this line he loves to talk about the that's just like, sounds like Ronald Reagan talking about, like, the builders, the entrepreneurs, the dreamers, the people who think big. And I mean, again, that going back to what we were talking about earlier about
So
Doge.
who's going to get the government subsidy to think big?
Well, exactly. I mean, he canceled
Like,
the
let's be
capital
honest.
gains tax increase, which
You know
was
what I
again,
think left-wing creators should do? They should fucking get government money. Just apply for government fucking money, because nobody makes it without government money. Don't even tell me shit.
yeah. I mean, some
Don't you
have,
get tax breaks for even investing?
yeah,
That's what we didn't like. I'm pretty sure the breach got some.
yeah. The breach got a bit. Ricochet, I think, got a bit. Like
Good,
there is a bit of
good.
government funding
Let's do
being raised
it.
for media,
Because
but
this idea that going to government funding is somehow like that, everybody goes to government funding, even the people giving you jobs.
yeah. I mean, well, even the right. I mean, True North is a charity, right?
There you go.
People who give them money get tax receipts for it. Rebel tried to be eligible as a, journalist organization to get subsidies. They got smacked down in court because they don't produce enough original content. But again, yeah, our opponents are doing this. So I think we need to, that these sort of
Level
avenues.
up to the trough, my friend. That's the reality of things. Look at the tech sector. The tech sector wouldn't even we wouldn't have these giant too big to fail tech companies without government subsidies and legislation. Like,
Yeah.
I really want everybody to just sit and understand that there's nothing that happens in terms of anything coming to market, industry selling their wares, all sorts of things like that without some sort of government subsidy. So when people say, well, government shouldn't be picking winners or losers, no, but they do. And they will, you know.
Yeah.
Like
That's
that's government. That's the way it works. That's the way it works in a free market society is everybody gets subsidized. If you can, do the paperwork right. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I feel like every content creator should be like, give me some money. And they should go around and to philanthropists and shit like that and be like, give me some money.
Yeah. I mean, that is, and I guess since we're talking about media, one last thing I did want to bring up because we have been very hard on Carney and rightfully so, is his plan for the CBC, which I thought was quite impressive. And it was pretty stunning to me that the NDP had they were just like, yeah, we want to increase funding to CBC also, but there was no outlining how they would do it because Carney's like, go, because he is, as a global banker, he does have a certain cosmopolitan worldview, and he's like, well, you look at Britain, France, Germany, they all fund their public broadcasters way more than we do. And if we're serious about public broadcasting, we need to reach funding.
They need to get out of the advertising
Yeah,
market
go to advertising business, stop competing
because
with
they're actually they're badly, what's the word I'm looking for? Badly shifting the advertising market. In other words, because they're subsidized, they can offer lower prices in the advertising market and actually squeeze out private players. So that's the way the government does things poorly. Because I think if you're gonna have a public broadcaster, have a fucking public broadcaster. Don't half-ass this shit. If you're going to, I don't like fucking operating budgets that will be balanced. I don't like it. Okay. Which means that basically, how does that work?
well, I think CBC would be operational spending, except for the building, CBC headquarters would be capital if they're, renovating it or whatever. But
Does it mean operating as in the federal public service idea of operating? Yeah, because operating budgets.
yeah,
What
I
about
would
grants
imagine it
and
would be jobs and
contributions?
services
But
and
what about grants and contributions then?
I think that would be operating spending, unless it's going to like a big capital project. But I don't. Again, um, the specifics remain to be seen, right? Of what.
I'm
Uh,
getting too much in the weeds here for audience. I'm getting too much in the weeds here for even public servants. But the point is that I don't I've seen an environment of operating budgets being balanced and cut. Never works. Because you do need operating budgets to deliver the services. And if you don't have adequate operating budgets, then you see those people that you're trying to help, they will fall through the cracks anyway. It's not good. I don't like that idea at all.
yeah, and I mean, again, it's one thing when you're running on that in an election campaign, and it sounds nice and it sounds middle of the road. But I think when people start feeling the effects of that, um,
Because
they're
the
not
first
gonna.
thing that goes with operating budgets are jobs.
Mhm.
So what are we looking at? Austerity? Just say austerity.
Well, but austerity doesn't sound nice. I mean, Carney said that he's
You're
going to.
getting rid of the people who would do the jobs that that require service delivery. Doesn't that mean your service delivery is going to be compromised? Isn't that what the US is doing? Basically kicking people out of jobs?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Doge is doing.
There's an operating budget reduction,
Yeah, I mean, and Carney says he's going to
and you need
cap.
corresponding operating budgets with capital projects, by the way.
Yeah.
So I don't know what he's talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an artificial distinction. Apparently in the corporate world, that's how they do things, which is cool. But
That ex-
government
that
isn't the
explains a
corporate.
lot.
Yeah, yeah,
Government isn't corporate
yeah, and it's interesting to hear a lot of liberals echo that language. That government needs to be run like a business. Um,
because liberals never, okay. So I don't like small L liberals. I don't like centrists. I don't like moderates. They're all euphemisms for people who are fair weather and capricious. Okay. They will just go with what these are the same people who in last Trump term were like, oh my gosh, a ban? Oh my gosh. Um, um, children being detained. Oh my gosh. Now liberals decided border control. Yeah, border control. Yeah, border control. And now they've moved the Overton window to the to the right, where like 4 or 5 years ago, these same people were like, Black Lives Matter, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know
yeah, I mean,
more.
it's a weather
You
vane
know, it is.
ideology.
Thank you. It is. It's a weather vane type of existence, of political existence, and I don't trust it. So liberals are a problem. And these same liberals will tomorrow, when everything goes to shit, come back and say, we need to work together. And it's like, no, we don't. No, we don't need backstabbers. No, no. Well, you're just trying to divide. Then they'll talk about you're just trying to divide us. It's like, no, you already made your choice. You chose the division.
Yeah,
I don't know what to tell you.
it's always, people on the left are the ones being divisive. It's never liberals who are just like, you're crazy, your ideas don't matter. Um,
How are
oh,
we going to pay for it?
you have to vote for us, or it's your fault when the right takes power. And it's like, well, which one is it? If we're so irrelevant, then why do you want us to vote for you?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So anyway, that's my little rant. Well, my big rant. I've so many issues with how these things are portrayed. I don't we don't portray we don't portray context, and therefore you don't get the full breadth or like even high level breadth of the issue. You don't have to know the specifics of everything. But if you have certain guiding lights, you know, then it will take you certain places. Don't get me wrong. I talk to like farmers and shit. You know what I mean? Because I don't know shit about farming. And then I'm like, oh, no wonder agricultural policy is so bad. And they're telling me ways in which it's bad. And I'm like, that makes sense. Okay. Oh, I see why you're conservative now. Like I can actually see it. And I could see why. And it is exactly the failure. Why isn't the NDP more successful in rural areas in those ridings?
Yeah, I
They
mean, you've
become
got.
a little bit too, city slicker metropolitan.
Yeah, educated professional class. And I mean the NDP, the CCF was a, rural party. And I don't um I mean now the NDP doesn't hold a single rural riding. I mean, I guess you could say Nunavut because it's
Yeah.
includes rural.
Yeah.
Um, but other than that, it's Vancouver, it's Edmonton, it's Montreal, it's Winnipeg, right? And that is also a big problem. I mean, Charlie Angus, you know, represented rural riding for a very long time.
Yeah,
Uh,
he's old school NDP though.
yeah, yeah,
And
and
and yeah, that's the NDP are do pop up in the wrong places. They should be fighting out that, and they should be into infrastructure in rural areas. We don't talk enough about rural areas because we're in the city, and you know, you go 10 minutes out of Calgary and you hit a rural place, and then you're like, oh shit, life is completely different. They have different, and nobody, I don't think, I think the conservatives are the only ones who take them seriously.
yeah, I mean, they've really developed a monopoly on rural voters. They won Charlie Angus's riding.
Of course
Um,
they did.
And I mean, Nikki Ashton also represented a rural riding in northern Manitoba. The Liberals took that. That riding has a lot of Indigenous peoples there.
But what has the NDP done for Indigenous peoples?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, Charlie Angus
Oh,
did.
he's one. Charlie Angus
Yeah, yeah,
is like, I would never ever. Yes, I would. I would critique people. But the point is that you knew that about him.
yeah.
You knew that about him, that was he was talking about Indigenous rights and stuff like that before it became a thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, now almost a third of the NDP caucus is Indigenous, right? You've got Laurie Idlu in Nunavut,
Mhm.
Leah Gazan in Winnipeg. I mean, again, I remember reading Nigon Sinclair, an interview with him about Trudeau's legacy, and he was like, "Look, Trudeau was the best prime minister for Indigenous people ever." And it's just and he was a disappointment because the bar is so low that, he said the right things. He did a few things. And, he's better than anyone before him. Right. And, um, I do think the NDP has an opportunity to be the party of Indigenous rights. I mean, Leah Gazan, did put forward that legislation to try and criminalize residential school denialism in the same way Holocaust denialism is a criminal offense. Which you can debate the merits of sort of criminal
Absolutely.
uh, bad history that is rooted in bigotry, if that's the best way to approach it. But I mean, that is it's something. It's people were at least talking about the issues.
It became a national issue, and I think that's why I think Trudeau will be probably in a generation from now, because he really did. Um, let's talk about Trudeau before, right? And when you see the retrenchment of the importance of these issues, I saw some little reconciliation blurb, and I do call it a blurb. And where in the Liberal platform, and where was that? The
Well,
fucking
that's it.
back.
Carney had almost nothing to say about Indigenous issues. Karen Puglisi at APTN did a piece during the leadership race, and she mentioned he was at a campaign stop in Halifax, and he was asked about like Mi'kmaq fishing rights,
Right.
and he started talking about child welfare. I mean, he um,
He
isn't.
has no idea about Indigenous people, by the way. None. Zero. Zilch. And that's something he always stumbles over because he knows nothing.
Yeah.
He
And
absolutely knows nothing. He didn't do his reading.
yeah, but I mean, I think that he's probably like compared with Polyev, who we know what he said when Harper apologized for residential schools. Um, I do think there are people in Carney's orbit who are indigenous, well versed in indigenous issues, who will probably teach him. But I mean, it doesn't help that he is also pledging to expedite, like Polyev is pledging to expedite, resource extraction projects when,
The
uh,
only
which,
the
which
only mention of
contradicts UNDRIP, right? Which
it
Trudeau
does, yeah.
uh,
Uh,
signed into
and in
law.
the back, in that little piece there, he barely talked about, oh, we're going to follow UNDRIP. It's like, no, you won't. No, you won't. You won't because A, you don't know what it is. B, you don't know Indigenous issues. And C, you're not here for social inclusion.
Right.
He's not here for, he doesn't give a fuck about social inclusion. And that's my problem because you can fix the economy. No, you can't. Um, the economy kind of, there's only so much you can do with the economy. If you think bettering the economy means avoiding Trump tariffs, I'm like, it seems like it's a little more than that.
Hmm.
And and if he doesn't do something about the economy in like a year and a half, I'll give him 18 months. Then people are gonna get pissed because that's what he was voted in for, Trump and the economy. Because due to Trump.
Yeah, and to be this
That's
sort
it.
of steady, uh,
Hand on the tiller.
yeah, to
Yeah.
navigate Canada through this crisis. But I love and there are again some promising things in his platform about creating this national, auto supply chain in response to the auto tariffs. But these are, if he does do them, and again, always read the fine print. That's a long term project, right? And that we're not going to.
So is
Um,
interprovincial trade.
yeah, which it
Like, have
turns
you
out.
met Quebec? People have these delusions of grandeur in their heads. They're like, yeah, let's trade between provinces, as though that's never been talked about. Okay. So first of all, my whole thing is they do know why we trade across the border more than to each other, right? The map. Like there is a distance issue here. Like BC is not trading with Halifax or with Nova Scotia. It's not happening,
Because it's
right?
easier to trade with Washington.
It is
Or
because it's a shorter distance.
yeah.
Distance. You think we're going to get apples from BC? No.
Well, we are in
Distance.
Alberta, but
Oh, yeah, you guys in Alberta will. But by the way, you know what I've been noticing in Alberta? Besides food is marginally cheaper, is that avocados are cheap as hell in Alberta.
I haven't lived in Ontario for so long that I can't like really compare prices. But generally, the CPI is much higher in Alberta than any other province.
Yeah,
It's just,
exactly.
but it's interesting how there are some things based on like supply chains that
Ontario's expensive, eh? Ontario's hell expensive.
yeah.
It's like, are you for real? I don't know how we're living in Ontario, to be
Well,
honest.
I think in Ontario, the prices of housing and energy, which are both cheaper in Alberta, really drive the cost of living up. Um, Whereas here, we've got cheaper energy, and cheaper housing for now.
Hmm.
But the cost of everything is higher, but also wages are higher. So historically, they've been. Uh, So, of course, now our minimum wage is one of the lowest in Canada. I remember when it became the highest around the time I first moved to Alberta under the NDP government. So, yeah,
Nurses now receive the highest wages in the country after
yes,
the
that's right,
deal.
because they just got a good deal. Which, yeah, is it kind of came as a surprise to me that they were able to get such a good deal. Especially with oil prices now going down. But we'll see what happens in the next budget. But I think we should probably wrap it up now because we've been talking a while. My phone's battery's low. I could talk to you
My
all day
AirPod
about these
batteries are
things,
low. Yeah.
but we got things to do. I know it's 5 o'clock where you are, so
Man, the time shift fucks me up when I'm in Calgary.
yeah. When I'm in Ontario, it also um because I normally go to bed. Yeah, I like I find it hard to go to sleep before midnight.
Mm.
So you know I'll go to bed 1, 2 in the morning, and when I'm back in Ontario, it's like 2 a.m. My body feels it's 2 a.m., but it's actually 4 a.m. And it's just like, oh shit.
Yeah, I haven't been asleep before midnight in a bit. And I think that's because I stayed up later in Calgary. And so does that even work? Hold on. Yeah, I stayed up later in yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And now my body's like, oh no, it's 3 o'clock.
Anyways, great talking to you today, Erica. Always great to chat about politics with you and economics, which is your field of expertise. And yeah, I'll give you the last word. Tell people where they can find your work and follow it.
So um, so a lot of people know me from Bad and Bitchy. I am pausing Bad and Bitchy for I have an idea and I have to see if it's gonna spring. Um, so I'm just kind of pulling myself together this year and just like taking it easier. I am on Blue Sky. That's probably where you can find me at Wicked Chick, WICKDCHIQ was it B Sky?
bsky.social, or
Social. Yeah.
you can make your handle your like personal website.
Yeah, I did that with Bad and Bitchy.
Oh yeah, because mine's readtheorchard.org. So if people like a post of mine, they know where to, read more.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still doing some stuff on Instagram on the Bad and Bitchy podcast page. But yeah, you can find me at Blue Sky. That's basically where I'll be. Twitter, don't bother because I got on Twitter for the election and then I was like, I know I hate this platform again. Okay, so I'm back on Blue Sky exclusively, but my Twitter's still open. I love how this is the longest explanation. My Twitter is still open, but if you're going to DM me or something, I don't check Twitter DMs. That's you too, Jeremy. Um,
Yeah, I can imagine the sorts of
I
DM.
I really don't. I don't need that headache. My whole year is about finding peace. Finding peace. This is what I'm gonna do. This is my year. So I'll still be writing. I write for the Hill Times. Um I have a column. I'll still be writing there about federal politics. Yeah, I'll see you guys digitally. I'm probably not going to see you much in person this year, but that's okay. I'll still be here. with Jeremy. Jeremy, say what's up to the Calgary crew
Will do.
for
I'm
me.
going down there next month actually for.
I apologize for not like reaching out this winter, but if you see me on Blue Sky, you know my foot was like, and that's literally 2 months I'd be sitting on my ass. And that's literally why I haven't been anywhere.
Yeah.
My foot. It's getting better now, though. I'm starting skating again.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm learning to figure skate, everybody. That's my big thing.
Yeah. So if
Um,
you want to find Erica in person, you can go to the skating rink
yeah, yeah. I'm not going to tell you
somewhere in
which one.
Ottawa.
Somewhere in Ottawa. But yeah, just catch me on Blue Sky. Honestly, that's where I am. That's the
All right.
longest explanation ever.
No, that's great. Take care, Erica, and I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks for listening, everyone, or watching rather.